Hello everyone, welcome to our new video. In this video, we are going to continue on creating the dynamic slaves in the Jenkins over the Kubernetes cluster. This is the fifth part of our video. If you have not gone through the previous four parts, I will suggest you to go through it. Those are like the pre-requirements before you can go through this video. All right, so in the first part, we have talked about the introduction of the dynamic slaves of Jenkins over the Kubernetes. In the second part, we have covered about the minikube and the Docker installation and how you can install the kubectl to access your Kubernetes cluster. In the third part, we have gone through the installation process where we have created an NFS, we have created a persistent volume claim, Nginx deployment, and Nginx service to expose the Nginx. In the fourth part, we have gone through the access, how we can access the Jenkins dashboard using the Nginx as a reverse proxy, because Kubernetes does not expose its own components. So we have used the reverse proxy to access the Jenkins dashboard. Now in this part, we are going to continue and we are going to configure the Jenkins to use the dynamic slaves. Okay, so let's go through this. So this is the Jenkins dashboard which we have created in our last video. Okay, now once you have gone through this, go ahead with the manage Jenkins. Now there are some prerequisites of securing Jenkins and all that we are not going to cover. Our main focus is on getting the dynamic slaves configured, so we are going to keep focus there. All right, now once you are inside, go inside the manage plugins. Now we are going to select the available tab and we are going to install a Kubernetes plugin. Okay, so just select the Kubernetes plugin and select install without restart. This is going to install a number of plugins for making Kubernetes installed on your Jenkins installation. Now once this has been installed, then we are going to configure it. So let this install. All right, so here you can see all the plugins has been successfully installed. So we can go back to the dashboard, go to the manage Jenkins again, and this time we are going to go to configure system. Now inside the configure system, go ahead and search for the cloud. Okay, so under this cloud, it says a separate configuration page has been created for the cloud. Just click on this. So it will take you to the configure cloud. Now you can click on this drop down and select the Kubernetes from it. Okay. Now once you select the Kubernetes, it will ask you multiple information. Click on Kubernetes cloud details. It will ask you for the Kubernetes URL. Okay. Now this Kubernetes URL will be your cluster IP. So go ahead and provide it the cluster IP. Now you can go back to the instance, just switch to the vagrant user and run kubectl cluster -info. Okay. Now it will provide you the IP. So just copy this. Okay. And go back and paste it. So this is the Kubernetes URL. Okay. Next, it will ask you the namespace. So within the namespace, we are going to say Jenkins. We have created the separate namespace for it. Now, if you scroll down, it will ask you the Jenkins URL. Okay. So this is the URL that we have to provide Now, basically this URL, Jenkins URL, is for the IP on the pod, which is running inside the Jenkins. So you can go back and run kubectl get all inside the namespace of Jenkins. So you will get the IP. Okay. Now you can describe the pod. Okay. To get this IP. So the pod which is running right now is this one. Okay. Just copy the pod name. Okay. And then do kubectl describe pod name. Okay. Inside the namespace Jenkins, and we are graph for the IP. So this command should provide you the IP of your pod. Just copy this IP. Okay. And uh, we are going to go to the dashboard and say http :// IP followed by port number 8080 on which we have exposed it. Okay. Now rest of the things are just fine. So leave it like this. Okay. And now you can go ahead and click on test connection, but it will be failing for now and giving a forbidden error. Okay. Just click test connection and it gives you a forbidden error. Okay. Now this forbidden error can be removed by using the cluster role binding and allowing the authorization. Okay. So next you need to do a cluster role binding. So go ahead, go back onto your node and run the cluster node binding. So next we are going to do the cluster role binding. So let's get back to the instance and let me clear this, and we are going to use the cluster role binding. So it says that the cluster role binding role-based access control authorization KTS IO permissive binding has been created. Now once you have created the permissive binding, okay, so go back to your configuration, scroll down, and you will see add pod labels. So you can add a pod label here. Okay. In the key we are going to say Jenkins, and value we are going to say slave. That is, it will be running on the slave node. Now you can name a node, and it will be pod will be deployed onto those nodes. Next, you can use a pod template. So we can say pod template, add pod template, and we are going to name our pod template now. So we are going to say Jenkins slave -slave. Then we can say pod template details. We are going to run it inside the Jenkins. Then for labels, I can say Jenkins -slave. Okay. And I can select use this node as much as possible. And then it will be asking us the container detail. So I can say add container template, and inside this I can say name of the container is Jenkins -slave. Then Docker image I can use of Jenkins CI/JNLP-slave, and the home directory will be /home Jenkins agent. Then the command that I want to run is /bin sh-c, that is the shell command. Then the arguments that I want to pass is cat. I want to allocate a TTY. Okay. So that's it. You have done the configuration now. Okay. Next, we are going to create a job and see if this dynamic configuration is working or not. So let's save this. All right. Now we can go back to the dashboard, say new item, and I can say test. I can say freestyle, say okay, test job. I will say restrict, and I want to restrict it to the Jenkins slave. Okay, where I want to run on Jenkins slave. And then we are just going to test for test purpose. I will run a sleep command. I'm not doing much into it. I will simply say sleep 60. So it will sleep for 60 seconds whenever I run this. Okay. Now I can go ahead and just save this, and I can say build now. Now once I run this build now, it's going to run the build. Okay, this will stay for pending for some time, and then it will get executed. So just wait for some time to get it executed. Already it's showing in the pending state. So I'm going to make one more change. Okay, I will go back to the configuration, go to manage Jenkins, configure system, and I will scroll down to cloud separate configuration, and inside this we will say Kubernetes cloud details. And if I just scroll down, and I will be changing this Jenkins URL. So we have exposed it using the port 8080. So I will use the cluster IP instead, and I'm going to paste this because the pod IP will keep changing. So I'm using the cluster IP here. Okay, and that's it. You can go ahead and save this. Now once you save this, let's go back. Let's close this one. And let's build this again. So just wait for some time. It will come up and running. All right, guys, I was checking this, and there's one more thing that we have done a typo while creating this container template. Just change, I have mentioned J 2 times, just delete one time J and save it. Make sure that there is no configuration, other configuration error. Now once you have done this, save it. Okay, you can cancel the previous job and run the build again. Now once you run the build again, it will be staying in the pending state for some time. So you can see now this has been running. So if you see, it was able to connect to the slave, and then it has run the sleep 60. So it is sleeping for the 60 minutes. Now, if I show you the configuration, this is how the final configuration looks like. So if you go to the cloud, okay, in the separate configuration under the Kubernetes, click on Kubernetes cloud detail. This is the information that we got from the kubectl cluster-info. Okay. If I do kubectl cluster-info, so basically this is the information that you need to copy inside the Kubernetes URL. Namespace is Jenkins, then Jenkins URL. Now Jenkins URL, this is the information that we got from the IP. So this is the IP. Now it was running on the port number 8080. We exposed over it, so we have provided it. Then we put the pod label as Jenkins slave, and then the pod template Jenkins slave. And if you look here, Jenkins is the namespace, labels Jenkins slave, and container template is Jenkins slave. We made a typo here with double J. So make sure that the typo is not there, and the working directory, command, and argument. That's it. So this completes the slave, like the dynamic slave configuration. And you can go ahead and run as many builds as like, and it will be running on different slaves. It will be creating inside the Kubernetes cluster. So go ahead and run it. This will always assign you a executor, and then you can go ahead and run those executors using the dynamic slaves. Okay, so again, this is running. Now if you want to check, you can also run docker ps, and you can say kubectl get pods inside the namespace Jenkins. Okay, so you will find that two pods are running right now. Okay, one is this one and the Jenkins slave that we have created. Okay, so this is how basically it executes. Every time you run, it creates a pod and runs it. Okay, now the third job has started. So if I look here, so you will see that the previous pod is terminating and it has been replaced by a new pod. Okay, that's how Jenkins keeps running the configuration. Now one last thing that you need to, that during the configuration we have hard coded the master server IP inside the configuration, which is going to cause an issue if the pod of the master server stops. And the pod can stop anytime, so it will not be able to decide what is the IP where it has been launched if you are running on a multi-master configuration. So in order to solve this problem, this can easily be solved with the help of NFS server that we initially created. So we are going to create a shell script, and we are going to create that shell script in such a way that it updates the configuration of the Jenkins in such a way that the latest IP on whatever host it has been launched, that gets updated into the config.yaml file. And when the Jenkins starts, it will read that config file, and it will basically able to understand what is the master where the configuration is running. So this is how the tomorrow when we do any deployment or upgrade Jenkins, it will become neutral and it will keep working like that. So in order to resolve it, we are going to create a IP-update.sh. This is the shell script that we are going to create. Now inside this shell script, we are going to write a simple shell script. Basically, it's a shell script which updates the Jenkins IP inside the Kubernetes cluster, and we are using a set. And basically this set, what it does is it identifies the IP and updates that inside the var Jenkins underscore home config.xml file. Now this is the location where the config.xml file has been placed inside the Jenkins container. So if you, after running, if you go inside the Jenkins pod and you check it, then you will find the config.xml to be running inside this location. So we can save this. All right, now this file will be available inside the pod because we have created inside the NFS mount, and that NFS mount has been created as a volume inside the pod. So this is available inside the pod right now. Next, we are going to update the Jenkins deployment.yaml file. Okay. Now in the Jenkins deployment.yaml file, we have updated this section. Okay. This is where the lifecycle comes in. So during the time of the pod creation, it allows you to execute a start command. Since the script was already copied inside the pod, so we can execute the command. So we are executing a command where we are calling a shell, and it's basically passing -c. Now we are going to change it a little. Shell is the older form. So we are going to run bash, and we are going to change this -c with -x. So basically it prints the whatever execution is happening, it will be printing it on the screen. This will becomes easier for the troubleshooting purpose. And at the same time, we are executing this shell script. So basically, when the pod comes up next time, it will execute this. And since this is part of the life cycle, so this command will get executed and it will update the config file. And when the Jenkins comes up, that will get the IP of the master where the pod has been launched automatically. Okay. So you can save this. Now, once I have saved the Jenkins deployment file, okay, we can run the deployment. So what I am going to do is I will say kubectl apply -f, and I will say Jenkins -deployment.yaml. Now, once I run the deployment, so deployment has been done. So we can say kubectl get all -n Jenkins. Okay, it will show all the pods which are running. So all right, so it failed because we have not moved this IP-update.sh inside the /data directory. Now, once we have, that's why it was not able to find that when we did the deployment, it didn't go through. Now we have moved it inside the /data directory, so it will be available. So what we can do is we can deploy the once more. So let's apply the changes once more. So we can say kubectl apply -f Jenkins -deployment.yaml. Okay. And if I do kubectl get all -n Jenkins now, so I can delete this pod. It will try to recreate it. I can say kubectl delete pod name -n Jenkins. Now the pod has been deleted, so it will recreate it. So if I recreate, it will recreate the pod. So this is the configuration which is live now. So you see it has been running now. Now what I can do is I can, so it has created the pod with the latest configuration. Now, so this is how you can update the pod, and it can launch on now on any node, and it won't give, it will be updating the correct IP inside the config.yaml file automatically. All right, that's all for this video. We have successfully configured the dynamic slave for the Jenkins inside the Kubernetes. So ending the video now. If you are struck or you face any difficulties, please update to us in the comment. I will be reaching out to you. Thank you, everyone.